Hello, my name is Sam. I recently got second place at the Tuggerah Regionals playing this deck, the RB Cyber Dragons. Originally, this deck started out as just a fun way for me to play some nostalgic old cards, but it turns out it's actually really quite strong. Hakuna Matata reached out for a deck profile, and so that's what we're going to do today. First and foremost, I should probably clarify. So this deck, I've already spoiled the fun part. It does play Cyber Dragon cards, and they are a very integral part of the strategy. But it is also first and foremost an RB deck, basically because the Cyber Dragon cards, at least the good ones, which are the ones that we're playing, have historically been quite good at swarming the board with machines, but they've not had a lot of good things to convert those machines into, or you've had to play like other sort of bad cards like the original Cyber Dragon, or just a lot of weird bricks and stuff that's not great to draw, and the consistency's not really been there. So basically what we're looking at is a deck where there's RB, which is the new one that's come out. It has a lot of really powerful cards, but there's not quite enough cards to make a cohesive strategy. And the Cyber Dragon deck has the same sort of problem, but when you put them together, it turns out it works quite well. So basically we'll start with just the heart and soul of the deck, which is your RB Stage Landing. If you don't know what this card does, I'll quickly run through it for you. It's a emergency teleport from the deck or extra deck, not once per turn, and it has a graveyard effect to protect your monsters from being destroyed by card effects or battle. Which is absolutely insane. You can consistently use 3 of these in a turn. The reason that people have sort of been sleeping on this card is because it does have a very heavy restriction, which is that you can only summon monsters from the extra deck that are machine type with 1500 or less attack for the whole turn in the turn that you use this card, not just the rest of the turn. Which means that there are some restrictions. Obviously, we're not allowed to play things like Cyber Dragon Infinity or Chimeric Rampage Dragon that if you're used to playing in a traditional Cyber Dragon deck, because you simply aren't allowed to summon them. However, this card is so good that it is the reason that this deck is even playable in the first place. So we're playing 3 of the Stage Landing. We are also playing 3 of the RB Funk Duck. Basically, this card is 3 more copies of Stage Landing. But it also has some really cool effects on the field. So this one just searches an RB card on activation, but it also has an effect that if an RB monster you control leaves the field by card effect, it lets you E-Telly from the deck to summon another RB monster. So if this is E-Telly, this is 2 E-Tellys. It's also usable in your opponent's turn, which means it's usually 3 E-Tellys. Very strong card. The only thing that you should be aware of with this one is that it's a mandatory search on activation, which means that you have to be very careful when playing around draw with this deck. If you make this your first search, like if you go terraforming into something like a Funk Duck and your opponent hits you with a draw, this card cannot be activated because the effect to search is mandatory. So if you have this card in your hand, it's almost always going to be the first thing that you do, at least going first, just so that you have that effect on the field, because that first search for another E-Telly, followed by an E-Telly later in your combo, followed by an E-Telly in your opponent's turn, you want to have this card in rotation where possible, but you want to be careful if you're making this card your first search, because it can really very heavily be punished. Just something to keep in mind, but obviously you're going to max out on it because it's a card that you absolutely want to see. So these are sort of like these cards are the reason that I wanted to try this deck to see if I could make it work, because obviously the card quality here is insane, but surprisingly, they're not actually the best cards in the deck. We have 3 copies of Cyber Dragon Core. We have 3 Cyber Emergency. We have 3 Cyber Duck Realm, 1 Cyber Duck Chimera, and I suppose I'll include this here as well. So we have the Pot of Prosperity. So obviously these are the good cards. However, if you're not familiar with the RB Extra deck, I'll quickly just show you the important stuff that you need to know now. We have an RB Booster and an RB Brute Blues. What this card means, this is basically a Fiendsmith Requiem, or more sort of like Moon of the Closed Heaven, then being linked off into a Fiendsmith Requiem. That's what RB Vulcan Booster is with any 2 machines. So if you have 2 machines, that's full RB combo. The other thing here is that Brute Blues is just 2+ machines, it's a link 3, and it is also full RB combo. So what that means is, if we have cards like Cyber Dragon Core that can put 2 machines on the board, that's full RB combo. However, if we can put a 3rd machine on the board, which these starters all can, you also then have an insulation into hand traps because you can go Brute Blues and then resolve the combo anyway, even if the Vulcan Booster gets stopped. So all of these cards that we're playing allow us to not only get into the combo, but also push through a number of interruptions to make sure it resolves. So it's like 17 starters. It's absolutely insane. I'm going to show you at the end what these cards can do, but the thing that I love about the Cyber Dragon engine here specifically, compared to a lot of like the other engines people are playing with RB, is these cards are phenomenal going seconds. Obviously, if anyone's ever played Cyber Dragon before on this channel, I'm sure most of you guys will know what these cards are already. But yes, we have the Chimera text here. So the ability to just immediately apply pressure on your opponent's board and threaten to just contact fuse everything away is absolutely insane. Not many decks can normal summon a core, or not just normal summon a monster, that isn't even required to resolve in order to do your full combo because you have all your RB stuff anyway. And then you can put pressure on things like a Yummy Snatchy, or if there's like a what's it called? Hieratic Seals or an IP. Even if there's something like your opponent's like links into the Link 3 Gorgon monster, I can't remember what it's called. You can just set a core, you can contact fuse it into a Mega Fleet. You can really put a lot of pressure on with just one Cyber Dragon core as a board breaker, not just as a starter. And that's one of the things I think is really strong about this deck compared to other variants you might play. And the cool thing is, the Fortress Dragons actually sort of bypass the restriction of your stage landing, because in the extra deck there are 0 attack. So once you put this guy on the field, he's normally going to be absolutely like ridiculously strong. You might be getting like, because obviously we're playing Clockwork Knight in this deck. Spoilers. Once you summon this guy, he'll become a 4,000, 5,000 attack monster. But in the extra deck, and until he's already hit the field for that effect to apply, he's treated as 0, so he doesn't conflict with your stage landing. So it sort of lets you cheat around that restriction, which is pretty neat. What I'm going to show you here now is some of the cards that people might not like as much to play in their deck. They might consider them like sort of bricks per se. I don't view them that way, and I'll explain why. But we're playing the 2 Cyber Dragon sort of quote-unquote bricks. We're playing the 3 sort of RB quote-unquote bricks, and we're playing Regulus. I sort of view these cards functionally as sort of the same thing, in the way that I've sort of explained earlier how it sort of works with the 2 machines into the Vulcan Booster, and how the 3rd machine into the Brute Blues means that you're quite good at pushing through interruptions. So what happens is, if you have this, like say any of your Cyber Dragon starters, and you normal summon say a core and it gets stopped, that might seem like a problem. Any of these cards get you to full combo anyway. So even though they aren't starters in their own right, they are very good secondary pushes. Because even if you just have like a cutter and your core gets stopped and you just go normal summon core and you have, well, first you summon the cutter, sorry, so that you're allowed to, then normal core, even if they stop it, that's a Vulcan Booster. You get to play the game anyway. So all of these cards are additional pushes. But you want to sort of think of them, they're not starters, but they're good cards in the same way that like Call by the Grave or a Talent is a good card, because they allow you to basically say no to your opponent interacting with your combos and guarantee that your board is like resolving either way. These cards are technically somewhat bricky if you don't see them with the Cyber Dragon cards. So that is like a downside. But most of the time you're going to have access to your Cyber Dragon engine anyway. And so these cards actually start generating a lot of value. So I don't actually view any of these cards, even though you're only playing one of each, functionally in the hands, they fill the same sort of role. If you see them in combinations with each other, you're still going to get to play the game. So like the consistency of this deck is actually really high. Don't be like fooled into sort of thinking that just because there's all these different one-ofs, that they're all bad cards to draw. That's not true. It's just you don't want to play like 3 copies of each because they're all doing the same thing. And then you would start to run into like sort of clogging issues with your hand and that sort of thing. However, I will go through now. These are always like the good bricks. There are some true bricks in this deck, unfortunately, that you sort of have to play. And they are bad in different circumstances. So any of these cards can be good to draw depending on the situation, but you'd rather draw something else. So you got like your Lambda Blade and your Power Bond. These are probably the two worst cards to draw in the deck, the Power Bond specifically, because with the Power Bond, if you have Chimera and you have Power Bond in your hand, Chimera has an effect to discard a spell card from your hand to search Power Bond, which is normally Clockwork Knight. If you have your Power Bonds, you cannot discard your Clockwork Knight, which means you cannot get access to Regulus, and then you cannot use the Overload Fusion effect because Chimera turns this into like a Miracle Fusion-esque effect where you can banish from grave. So if you hard draw it, you can't do either of those things. This normally comes out going second for that reason, because it's not really that good to draw, and you're probably not resolving Chimera's on-field effect going second anyway. So surprisingly enough, this is actually going first card, not an OTK card in this deck. But it's still worth playing because of some of the stuff that I'll show you later, where you can it lets you apply pressure and force your opponent to interact with you before you even have to go into a single RB card. Then we have your other cards that are technically bricks, depending on the circumstances, but also not. Like, if you go first, and you're versing like a Yummy deck, and you have Clockwork Knight, and that's all it does, it's still a floodgate. If you're versing like Mitsurugi, they can't, like, none of their monsters in the field are rituals, so that shuts down like a significant number of their pushes. Next phase is a counter trap that's just basically Solemn Strike. If you have an RB card, pop one of your monsters, negate the activation of a monster effect, and destroy the card. So like, these cards are, yes, sure, in some cases they're going to contribute to like bricky hands, but they are just, it's a floodgate and it's a Solemn Strike. So it's depending on your the matchup and the rest of your hand. Sure, it might contribute to not having a play, but again, I don't consider these cards to be like necessarily bad draws. These like to throw you true bricks. And this is like, you'll side it out going seconds. Clockwork Knight is actually quite a good breaker in this deck, because obviously with the Chimera decks, having access to the Clockwork Knight is so much better going second in this deck than pretty much any other version of RB. You can even do stuff just like set a core and then Contact Fuse into a Mega Fleet. If they then interact with your Mega Fleet, then core banish from grave, summon another core, Clockwork Knight just turns everything into machine, Contact Fuse everything, just play the game, kill them. It's so easy to put 8,000 damage on the board from that point. Yeah, like, this card is honestly phenomenal. I have mucked around with lists where I played 2 or even 3 copies of this. I wouldn't, but you can. So that's like your main sort of engine cards here. So you're looking at, obviously, that's 6 extenders, 17 starters. You're looking at basically 23 pushes. We are playing slightly over 40. Not because of these, not even because of these, most is because of these two here specifically. We don't want to draw them. The Lambda Blade can be useful in niche circumstances. Like, obviously, Droll can be a bit of an issue. If you're looking at some of the cards that we're playing here, Droll can be an issue for this deck. Lambda Blade can be good with like your Falcon Booster if you're under Droll, because you can summon it from your hand and then it lets you get another one into rotation by sending it to the graveyard, which can sometimes help you get to like the 3rd copy of like a RB name into rotation. And 3 is sort of that critical point, because when we get to the extra deck, you'll see that having 3 rotation actually translates into having more interrupts in your opponent's turn. So like, drawing this card can be okay. Power Bond's definitely not okay. It's like, this card, I've experimented with this list that don't even play it. But I'll show you some comments again at the end that sort of like justify why it's there. And now I'll just quickly go through the non-engine. Okay, so we have your 3 copies of Molchami Fuelos, 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 3 copies of Ghost Bell, and I guess you have like the one imperm as well. These are your sort of hand traps. I'm actually not really playing this as a hand trap deck. It's more of a board breaker deck. But because realistically, I have played so many games where I will go second blind against Yummy and just break their board and OTK them with engine anyway. Like, this deck is quite strong going second. The issue is more to do with... There were some challenges I had with Draco Tail, especially when there's so many power spells in this deck. Draco Tail Flame is such a powerful card that I wanted to have something to sort of interact with that card. And my game plan going second, I see the side deck, there's a lot of board breakers. Those cards are great in combination with each other, but like against Draco Tail, they just negate the first one, they get some draws, and then by the time you wipe their back row, they've gotten like 2 draws anyway. It just feels super like weird. Whereas if you can just like pair those board breakers like a Lightning Storm or like a Feather Duster with like an Ash or like a Bell, the synergy is there, and plus it gives you options like when you're going first. So these are more like board breakers because they were the best sort of non-engine that can help me go first, like if I get drawled and I just want to have something that's good like in most matchups. But post side, I actually take these out a lot because I'm actually playing them more as board breakers, and they aren't the best board breakers, except against Draco Tail. But that was the matchup that I needed help with. More on that, there's also a Forbidden Droplet, because again, we're playing it as board breakers. What that basically means, we now have, with the 3 Ash, the 3 Bell, and the 3 Droplet, we have 9 cards in our deck that can basically say no to Flame, which means that more often than not, we can actually just play through Flame as if it didn't exist. And if that means that then we have the freedom to sort of side in those cards like the Lightning Storms and like the Feather Dusters, or make use of our Triple Tractic Thrust to like search for those sort of cards, so that our game plan starts to actually make sense even when we're playing against Draco Tail and we're having to play against cards like Flame. So that's why we're playing like the Ashes and the Bells, and we also need is to have, when we're playing that many like Charmies and Lightning Storms and just breakers in general, as you'll see when I get to the side, having cards that is good going first in pretty much all matchups is actually important. So that's sort of like the logic here, and then we're also just playing the Talents and the Call By. Thrust here. This card is probably... I don't know, like obviously Fulos is a good card. Droplets come in clutch. But Thrust is... There is just so many good Thrust targets, and the fact that this is not once per turn, being able to search Stage Landing on its own is a good enough reason for me to play Thrust. I was originally citing it, and what I ended up finding was that I would then end up citing it in going first and going second. I was playing D-Bear at the time, to be fair, which isn't like a play anymore. But a lot of the things that, like, for example, like I'm talking about like Draco Tail being a difficult matchup. Draco Tail threatens things like Phimina. It threatens things like, some of them will play, not necessarily Bystials, but I've had like Phantasmes, Nibiru. They actually will often put monsters on the board, which means that your Thrust is actually searching for talents going first. And the thing is, post-side, spoilers, there's another RB card that some of you may be aware of, was not in the main deck, the Lambdic Cannon, we'll get to it in a second. But this guy puts a monster on your opponent's board as part of the main combo, which means even if all your opponent does is like hit you with any monster-based hand trap, an Ash Blossom, Bell, even like a Charmy or something, depending on the Charmy, this card turns into search any spell card in your deck and then activate it this turn, even going first. So this card feels like the god card in this deck. When I added it in is when everything sort of really started clicking. And keep in mind as well, like using it as a breaker, if that's your final card and you haven't used your Cyber Dragon stuff yet, you can also just search for Emergency. And Emergency will then do the whole combo and also get you to Realm. And I could probably point out here, with the Realm, this card is a continuous spell. So what that means is, unlike the other engines that people are playing in RB at the moment, this card, before going into your RB cards, lets you use your Clockwork Knight to search the Clockwork Knight spell card, which also means going second, these cards are not only 8,000 damage, but they also contact fuse your opponent's entire board first. So you can like use 5 cards in your hand, finish with the thrust into an emergency, as long as you're not worried about draw. And then you can just go into a realm, go into a Clockwork Knight, get the Clockwork Knight, contact fuse everything, win the game on the spot. So thrust is a absolutely insane card in this deck. I'm trying to find options for like what to use going first. Like D-Barrier obviously was very nice in this deck when it did exist. I'm not quite sure what the plan will be with it going forward, but like I mentioned, even just being able to like search a thrust consistent, like a talents consistently, in itself sort of like warrants its place in the deck. That's the main deck. It's 45 cards. Side deck, I've sort of spoiled bits and pieces of it already, but we're looking at 3 copies of Feather Duster, 3 copies of Raigeki, 3 copies of Perulia. I side in all 10 of these against Yummy, and honestly, K9, most sort of board breaker decks as well. Sorry, not board breakers. Most stuff that isn't Draco Tail, I'll side in all 10 of these. Because it's just generically good against most stuff, and even if they have like an Omni Negate or 2, this deck can apply pressure into those cards first, and then still like thrust for Raigeki, break the board anyway. Or just have more than one of them and break the board anyway. I just found that rather than pairing the Charmies with hand traps, pairing the Charmies with more breakers and just drawing more engine in this deck just felt way better, because it becomes overwhelming, and that even if they full combo, they can't really stop you from just killing them in most cases. We do, however, play some cards for going first. There's your 3 Solemn Warnings, 1 Last Stand, 1 Lambda Cannon. Post side, if I don't want the Imperm, Last Stand is a decent option that you can set off of Thrust. Because it's just basically a RB stage landing, but as a trap card, which also helps you play into breakers pretty well. But I realized I've forgotten to say what these other cards do. It can summon any of these, or I should also mention the Lambda Cannon as well. So basically, your Driller is a target pop quick effect if it's pointed to by an RB monster. They all have this effect. If they're pointed to by an RB monster, they have a quick effect. This is a spell trap, negate, and destroy. This is a snatch steal. This only works in your opponent's turn. This one is just pop 2. This only works in your turn. But what that means is, on your opponent's turn, Last Stand can be either target pop, snatch steal, or you can make it a spell trap, negate. So thrust can be any one of those options depending what you need. And the other thing that's really nice is, I really haven't gone through my extra deck, is that once you get that third name into rotation, this becomes basically a free +1. Because as I'll sort of demonstrate here, we are playing in the extra deck, the RB Shepherd's Crook. What this one does is when it's summoned, you can just set a trap card. Sorry, not when it's summoned. Just once per turn while it's on the field in the main phase, you can set a trap card from your deck. So that can post side be this, if you need to get the third one into rotation. It can also just be your next phase. So that's your counter trap. That's why we main deck the next phase. I do think next phase is better in the main deck, because this one, being a counter trap that negates monster effects, there's no like monster effect negation built into the RB end board without this card. And being a counter trap, it can also help you get out of pinches where, like, if they have like the Yummy synchros, for example, if they manage to get that far, being a counter trap means they can't do the tag out effect. It just makes the end board slightly more potent. But post side, I do also play the Last Stand, because this has to pop one of your guys. If you get into a grind game with like just a Shepherd's Crook and like a next phase, that clears your board, so the Shepherd's Crook dies. Whereas if you have like a Last Stand, you can do something where like you just go Last Stand into say like a Lambda Blade, and then the Lambda Blade will like dump one to the graveyard on summon, and then use like the Snatch Steal effect so it dies. What that means is, like, if you have first off, this sticks around. You still get an interruption, so you can just keep resetting this every turn, so that you can just keep playing rather than this is like a once off sort of high impact. This allows you to actually have a grind game. But it also means like if you get like a third one into rotation, you can then use RB Shepherd Crook's like second effect, which is if you have 3 in your grave, you can target 3 of them, summon 1, put 2 on the bottom of the deck. So if I had like, I don't know, let's say we have a basic setup with like an RB Shepherd's Crook, and we have like 1 name in the graveyard, we can, rather than go for the counter up, we can go for the last stand. We can summon the Lambda Blade, dump the extra name. When this uses a Snatch Steal effect, I now have 3 in grave. So I can now target 3, choose whichever one I want. Let's just summon this one in this case. The other ones go back on the bottom of the deck. And now I get a second pop, and I've still got the Shepherd's Crook on the field. Which means that's a line that you can do pretty much with, as long as you have like any other, like the quote unquote bricks in your hands. Part of why I don't consider them to be bricks. You just pair that, like just 1 stage landing can do that under draw. Or I guess if you have 2 stage landings, then you can just by itself, like those 2 cards will do the same thing. Or if you have like a Funk Dock, it becomes even better, because then you can start using the E-Tailers. Maybe you can even just use the trap, like the counter trap at that point. So yes, Shepherd's Crook is a fantastic card. So playing, I'll go through the rest of it. So we have your 2 copies of Clockwork Knight. You don't need more of this, but you could cut it. I wouldn't play less, because the extra deck actually is fairly free. We have your 3 copies of your Brute Blues. We have your 3 copies of your Valken Booster. So obviously the booster being like the core centerpiece of the deck, Brute Blues also being full combo, I sort of figured that these are the most important ones to play at 3. The third Brute Blues though never did actually come up. What Brute Blues does, it gains effects when it points to different RB monsters. So when it does, it gains the attack of everything it points to. It can make a second attack and it can't be destroyed by card effects. And it also has a once per turn effect to search an RB card. So you can summon it and then you can just search like a Funk Dock, search like a stage landing, so on, and just play the game. And then we have the 2 copies of the Shepherd's Crook. So you know what this card does? Those are all like your sort of RB cards. The Valken Booster I should probably explain as well. When this card gets summoned, it searches an RB spell. So if you haven't already tested for Droll, I would normally make the first search just to stage landing, because if you search the Funk Dock, obviously you can't activate it under Droll. So stage landing at least gives you a play. It also has an effect to summon one from hand or grave once per turn, and then you can optional move it out of the EMC if you want to. So yeah, very strong card. Obviously it searches your E-Telly, but then it has a graveyard effect as well. The reason I'm playing 3 of this, obviously we have space, but this one you can often go through 2 in a turn. Like if you get impermed on the first Valken Booster, for example, you might like climb into the Brute Blues, search like your Funk Dock, for example, that way, so you still get to the Funk Dock. But then to get from Brute Blues into Shepherd's Crook, you'll go through like a second copy of your Valken Booster, because the second effect hasn't been used yet, so you can just link the Brute Blues into a Valken Booster if I have another name, and then get to your Shepherd's Crook that way. So you can consistently actually go through 2 copies of your Valken Booster in 1 turn. So this is the one that no matter what, I would always play 3 of. You could probably cut Brute Blues to 2 if you wanted to. So those are sort of like your RB cards. Now we have the fun stuff. So we have your 1 copy of Mega Fleet, your 2 copies of Fortress Dragon, 1 Hale's Varric the Mechanical Dawn, and 1 Typhon. Typhon didn't actually ever come up in testing or in tournament play. It feels wrong not to play it, but you could probably cut this card if you wanted to. Even like a second Mega Fleet might be better. Those who don't know, this card here, this is just Spell Trap Negate. So you make it with 2 Light Machines. I'll show you how you get that in the combo in a second. But 2 Light Machines, you'll banish them from graveyard using Power Bond, because it was searched off of Chimera. Spell Trap Negate. So you'll pair this with Regulus. Basically, if you start with Cyber Dragon Core, this is just free. So like sort of basic combo. I should probably point out before showing you this combo line, one of the cool things with this deck is because it's so modular in the way that you just sort of like, it's playing into boards and sort of like being able to just respond to what your opponent has. You're not winning this game by just doing full combo. Like if you full combo, you win. But there's a lot of cool stuff. Like if you get to like a Brute Blues and then that resolves and you're worried about like a back row, for example, you can just search a cutter and then put cutter on the field and then you've checked their back row with one stage landing. Or if you're worried about like a Snatchy, cool, you can now target the Snatchy and pop it when they use it to effect a Synchro Summon. So like there's lots of cool little interactions you can do in terms of searching what you need for the situation. It's not all about just resolving your combos. A lot of the strength of this deck is actually being able to sort of play into boards and like figuring out how to like navigate those situations. But showing you the combo will at least sort of give you a graph of like how the cards like function with each other. So here's just your basic combo with Cyber Dragon Core. So start with Core, normal summon Core, Core effects, grab your Realm, Cyber Dark Realm, gets Chimera, extra normal summon with the Realm. Then you can here link into your Clockwork Knight. And one key thing here, this is what I really like about the Cyber Dragon engine, is that Clockwork Knight here is actually applying pressure, and we haven't even had to touch a single RB card, and we still have 2 machines to make the RB cards after this. So you send the Cyber Dark Realm, which gets you your Clockwork Knight, and then your Chimera can discard the Clockwork Knight to get your Power Bonds. The more important thing here is not that we search Power Bond, it's that we got the Clockwork Knight into the graveyard, because now we can use a Clockwork Knight, pitch any other card, and that gets us Regulus. So we have a Regulus as like a plan B before we even have to commit to any of our like RB stuff. Now, here's when I'll go into your Falcon booster. And booster will use its effects to search for a Funk Dog, because we've already tested for Troll, so we might as well. I want to sort of point out here, obviously if we summon Regulus here as the 5th summon, that's fantastic. Sorry. Before we search this, Chain 1, Chain 2. I keep rushing this part. So we also get to Dumper Worm. Going back. With the Regulus here, obviously it's a 5th summon, protects from Nib. Sometimes, if you hard draw, like, for example, like one of your names, I'll just summon that before normal summoning Core, so that A, it protects me against like Imperm, Ash, Phaler, that sort of thing. But I also kind of want to get nibbed here on the 5th summon, because if I summon the booster, search the Funk Dock and get nibbed, Funk Dock still represents full RB combo, and I've got Power Bond and Regulus behind it. So it's just, I'm so happy about getting nibbed here. Whereas if I get nibbed after summon of Regulus, I actually lose my Regulus on my end board. And they keep their nib. So I actually, if I have the opportunity, I give them a window to nib me before summoning the Regulus to see if they misplay. But otherwise, yeah, your point is like you're safe from nib. Just something to keep in mind. But yeah, you'll summon the Regulus here by equipping the Clockwork Knight. And then you'll go for your Funk Dock. Your Funk Dock will grab you... Sorry, where is it? Your Stage Landing, your first one. Use it, summon the Lambda Blade. Lambda Blade effects, dump one of the names. Falcon Booster can revive one of the names. Then, we're honestly suffering from success here. So, what I would do... Just summon the Cyber Dark Worm, which lets us add back a Realm to hand. If we started with Emergency, I'd add Emergency back instead, because Emergency can then search Nashta for follow-up on the next turn, whereas Realm's kind of dead for follow-up, but it's free, so you might as well. Here into your Brute Blues. Brute Blues can search you another copy of your Stage Landing. And then you can use your next copy of your Stage Landing summon your Shepherd's Crook. Shepherd's Crook gets you the trap card. And then you can use the power bonds at the ends, banishing 2 Cyber Dragons from grave. The reason you like to do that is because you set the power bond, Cyber Dark one I forgot, when it gets summoned, you actually have to dump from graveyard to deck, from deck to graveyard as cost. So we actually have 2 cores here, I forgot to do that part. We banish both, 2 light machines, Haze Varug. So we have a realm. This doesn't actually have follow-up. If you wanted to play more Cyber Dark cards, you could make this follow-up. I've just never found it really mattered that much. So what you're looking at is basically 4 negates, Snatch Steal. When this tags out, Funk Top triggers, and you get to your final name, which is your driller. So Snatch Steal, pop, monster negate, counter trap, spell trap negate, omni negate. You're just winning. Like, and plus this can search your follow up. So that's your main combo. One other thing I'll sort of point out is probably how to actually kill people with this deck. It's super easy. All you need is either any 2 machines can do this, because obviously you search your stage landing. But if you have just 1 stage landing, you'll need a second to search, but you'll go stage landing into Brute Blues. Brute Blues effect search on the stage landing effect into Shepherd's Crook. That's 8,000 damage, because he gains the attack of Brute Blues, which is 1,500. He gains 500 attack for every other monster you control, that's 2,000. He attacks twice. So 3k, 3k, 2k. And you can do that with any 2 machines. So obviously, like, going second, that means your game plan is sort of, rather than like going for a hyper combo, you're just sort of using your Cyber Dark realm to get you to your, where is it? Your Clockwork Knight, wherever it's hiding. And then you're just threatening to just constantly contact fuse them, and using your breakers to help you make sure all that resolves. Once it's done, go into your Brute Blues, go into your Shepherd's Crook, punch, game. So, super fun deck. Absolutely would recommend giving it a shot. Like, strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, this version of the deck compared to others doesn't have like an inbuilt normal summon. So like, the downside is you don't get to use like Clockwork Knight to get Scrap Recycler and then have that like as just a extension to your normal RB plays. But we have so many Cyber Dragon starters that it's not usually relevant. And honestly, just going second with this deck is so strong. Just having access to your like Chimera Techs is just absolutely insane. Definitely recommend giving it a go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you do test it, let me know how it goes. It's a lot of fun. I'll catch you guys later.